Could Siren's curse be a bad sign for Top Thrill 2? Well, today we're going to talk about it. I'm going to take you from beginning to end. I hope you're ready. I hope you're excited. Let's get into this. Hey, you, press that subscribe button right now. I need you guys to come back and subscribe and hang out. We are starting this season out strong with a whole bunch of new videos. And also, we have a planning video that's out right now. So if you're planning your vacation, please go check that video out. And yeah, press the subscribe button. Also go join the channel if you would like to for additional content. And let's go. Let me take you on a journey back in time. In 2003, Cedar Point and Intamin opened up Top Thrill Dragster. And Dragster was the biggest coaster that had ever been made at that point in the world. 420 feet tall. It was the tallest coaster ever to be made. And it was a massive deal. It was also kind of hidden. Cedar Point hid itself from the public because they like to keep their anonymity, and they still like to do that. And that'll come in more as we continue through this. There was a ton of excitement surrounding that. And this all came at a time when roller coaster parks were doing a lot of competing with each other. It was actually called the Coaster Wars, and it really started, let's say, with Magnum. You had Magnum that was made, and then each park kind of tried to one-up the other just a little bit. Finally, then Cedar Point did Millennium Force, which was over 300 feet, and then Top Thrill Dragster, which was over 400 feet tall. At that point, then, you had the final linchpin that came in, which was Kingda Ka. Kingda Ka was also an Intamin ride. Its tallest element stood at 456 feet, far outshadowing Top Thrill Dragster at the time, and was kind of the final piece to the puzzle for the Coaster Wars until now, when we have Falcon's Flight. Its airtime hill is as big as both of these coasters. So this thing is like a whole different level. But that really doesn't come into play too much here. It's just one last piece to the Coaster Wars at this point as we know it right now. Now, I started my channel when it comes to coasters in 2020. And during the pandemic and then subsequent shutdown and then reopening of everything. And as Cedar Point reopened, I wanted to document a little bit of what was happening. And throughout 2020, Cedar Point had a very inefficient system when it comes to getting on different coasters, and Top Thrill Dragster was one of those. The next year in 2021, Top Thrill Dragster did reopen again, and at that point it was the last time that it was going to open because there was a massive accident that happened in the middle of that year, and was a terrible thing, and someone was irrevocably hurt by that coaster because a piece of shrapnel came flying off of it and hit that person. It's a really terrible situation, and it is what it is. It has been remade at this point and turned into another coaster, which is Top Thrill 2, but keep a pin in that because now that ride shuts down for quite a while, and a couple of other things happen in the middle of this time. A couple of years ago, before Top Thrill 2 reopened this last year, at the very end of the season, I said, there's this like massive open lot, and they also were getting rid of a building from there, which was an HR building. There had to be something that was going into that lot, and it turns out I was completely right, but it wasn't where I thought it was going to be or when I thought it was going to be at all. So I knew that Cedar Point was going to need to do something at some point, decided to pivot, or at least it seemed like they decided to pivot, because I knew that empty lot existed. I knew something was probably going to happen at some point there, and then all of a sudden, they decided they were going to get rid of one of their 2 water rides from inside the main park, and that was Snake River Falls. So Snake River Falls clearly was going to be the site of a brand new coaster, right? Wrong. To add insult to injury to this understanding that I had, Cedar Point then made this big to-do after they decided to tear down Snake River Falls, and they decided that they were going to make this big announcement video and kind of hyped some things up about a brand new coaster that they were going to build at Cedar Point. And that brand new coaster or something was revealed in a preview to be Siren's Curse, which was going to be their next and I believe 19th coaster at Cedar Point. Now, they weren't explaining really what it was. I wasn't sure if it was another water ride to take over the water attraction that they had just closed, or if it was going to be something else. But it turned out that they were not going to do what I thought at all, because I assumed they were putting it into the Snake River Falls area. Instead, they decided to put it into that open lot, which I had just said a couple of years ago was where I thought the next coaster was going to be. So the full announcement really surprised all of us in the coaster community, and we were very surprised to see that that's what they were deciding to do with their exciting newest coaster. We got through the rest of the season during Halloween weekends, and I started hearing rumors from these big YouTubers that had no real evidence, at least not that I understood at the time, and they were saying that Kingda Ka was going to be closed. Now, mind you, Kingda Ka was the largest coaster in the world at this time, the largest and tallest coaster that had ever been made. And in my head, there was no way they were possibly going to be getting rid of that ride. And especially these coaster YouTubers were not giving any real sources because they couldn't at the time. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I was just like, there's no way that's happening. I pushed back on Twitter real hard, and I will always be doing my penance walk, because really the truth is this had nothing to do with something bad from Coaster Studios or something bad from Theme Park Brandon or anything bad from East Coasters. These guys were really just trying to warn us all that if we wanted to get on Kingda Ka by the end of the year, we needed to go to Kingda Ka to ride it. And now, again, it was unfounded technically, but there's no way that they could have done anything, because it seems like there was someone in a board meeting who just said, there is no way that we cannot tell our public that we're closing the tallest coaster in the US and not do something. So this one person in the boardroom, while everyone else was saying, no, that's what we have to do because we can't open. I mean, in my opinion, they could have done anything. I'm still very mad at Six Flags as a company for deciding to get rid of this coaster unceremoniously. At least have a party on the grounds, do something, do a lottery for tickets if it's too inefficient to have a lot of people ride, do something to allow it to happen. They didn't do that. They decided instead to just unceremoniously get rid of this ride. Well, meanwhile, I was getting on Twitter and doing these Twitter tirades, just like, there's no way they're going to do that. This is unprofessional journalism, which again, I kind of stand by that. It was unprofessional journalism, but it was the one choice that these YouTubers were given because there was someone in a boardroom who was mad that this was happening, as they should be, to be completely fair. And so they alerted some of the biggest YouTubers to let people know that they need to go do Kingda Ka in the last opening weeks of Six Flags at that point. So they did it. The YouTubers who were responsible for this stuff did exactly what they should do. And again, that is why I am doing my penance walk. I will always be doing my penance walk because it really was not their fault at all. It was the fault of the stupid people in the boardroom at Six Flags who decided that they had to get rid of the largest ride in the world at the time and had to decide to do something extremely selfish and not allow their public to actually have a chance to enjoy that ride at the end, and not have the balls to just say, we are closing that ride. If you want to go ride it, here's your chance, which is exactly what they should have done, or they could have done 1,000 other things with still having some dignity for their last ride. And in this case, there was no dignity given to it. So I really don't think that there should be dignity given to Six Flags Great Adventure either. And so I know that's off topic, but I just kind of wanted to throw that in there for a little bit. So Six Flags has decided to get rid of Kingda Ka, the tallest coaster in the US and by extension in the world until this new coaster is made. But that does throw into question, if they're willing to do that, how far are they willing to go? And Six Flags has now shown a very troubling penchant, especially the Six Flags legacy parks, for just getting rid of rides. Now, nothing has been as big as Kingda Ka, so I'm not quite as worried about those, but the fact that they're willing to just delete rides, get rid of them one at a time, is kind of ridiculous seeming. However, also all the old Cedar Fair parks, which are now Cedar Fair legacy parks, are also now owned by the same Six Flags company. So it also comes into a little bit of worry for me that could this overarching Six Flags company be willing to get rid of rides just right, left, no matter where they are? And that comes back to Cedar Point also. So I certainly have fears that maybe Six Flags would be willing to get rid of some rides that Cedar Point has had for a long time that have been very iconic, because clearly Kingda Ka was incredibly iconic for Six Flags Great Adventure also. Now, rumor has it that Zamperla is working on Top Thrill 2, and they are trying to get all of the trains ready to go, recreating trains, getting stuff back on the track, working on what's really needed for this next year to make sure that Top Thrill 2 is supposed to come back up. And from what I've heard, Top Thrill 2 is supposed to come back up. However, that has always been the official position. Top Thrill 2 was closed within 6 days last year. So they opened it for a media event. It was open for 6 days. I think it did see like 2 days, maybe 3 days of regular park opening for just anyone to go to. I did get to ride it a couple different times, and then it was unceremoniously just shut down. They didn't even explain why. I was there on the day that it closed down. They didn't say if something, happened, if a wheel fell off, or who knows what was going on. I did hear from Beach Cliff Studios, and if you haven't gone to check them out, you should go check them out. They, from the very beginning, Jesse with Beach Cliff was saying that it seemed like there was maybe too much stress on the ride itself, and that clearly seemed to be the case. So I did learn definitely to trust Jesse's opinion based off of that. However, just to let things be known, he also does not think that there's any kind of way that Top Thrill 2 is going to be closed down this next year. And I just worry that maybe it could be. And we'll get into that more in just a second, in my theories in just a second here. So Zamperla is working. That does seem like a good sign that they are continuing to work on the ride. But again, throughout all of the summer last year, while Top Thrill 2 was just a lawn ornament, we were very much inundated with Twitter posts that were frequently saying, Top Thrill 2 is working on this. We're getting things together. We are continuing to hope to have Top Thrill 2 up. And finally, by Halloween, they did finally make a post saying that it would not be up for the 2025 season. Meanwhile, they were still marketing, even at that point, the park on Top Thrill 2, even though they knew there was no way it was going to be open. They were marketing their season passes on Top Thrill 2, which is why I've been very willing to criticize Cedar Point, because that was extremely crappy of them. And I don't care if they don't want to invite me to media events, because I want to give you guys the truth and make sure that you know every single part about Cedar Point, and I'm not going to just kowtow so that I can get an invite to a media event that isn't really going to help me out a whole lot anyway. So here's my theory. I do think very clearly that Cedar Point is trying to get Top Thrill 2 up, and they're really, really working on it. I do think, just as I've said from the very beginning, that Zamperla is not the most trustable company. Ever since the very beginning, they've just never worked on anything this big. There's no way that they can work on the biggest coaster in the US, and expect it to all go smoothly. Now, at this point, I'm sure they do have some additional models because of the mistakes that they've made before, where they can kind of tweak things and figure out maybe what the problem is. And I really hope that that is the case. I hope the Top Thrill 2 is up. It was a fantastic ride. So I'm not even saying that Zamperla has done everything wrong. They clearly haven't. They have done some great things. The problem is, I don't know that they have the know-how to really execute this ride in such a perfect way. Yes, other coasters, I've frequently heard people say that other coasters go down all the time. Yes, they do. And especially when those rides are brand new, they frequently go down because they've pushed limits and they've done as much as they possibly can. And there's a few things that need to be tweaked here and there, especially when they first open. However, it is unheard of for a ride to be closed for the entire season when it is brand new. That is an absolute absurdity. So it's not something that I think is acceptable or should be looked at as just like, oh, well, that's just the way it is. It's the way it should be. No, it really is not the way it should be. Cedar Point is culpable for it, and so is Zamperla, because Cedar Point was naive enough to go with someone who maybe was trying to give them more of a deal on something, and instead it's turned into a massive fiasco. However, Zamperla is also to blame for this one way or another. My theory on the entire thing is that I think there was a plan for, of course, none of this to happen. I think Cedar Point had a plan to recreate a ride over where Snake River Falls is. So I do think that plan is probably still in motion, and especially if this year both Siren's Curse and Top Thrill 2 get off with a beautiful start and things really go well for the season, I think there is a very good chance that we're going to see another coaster coming in like 2 years for covering up that huge plot of land that they have. They have an entire island that they could build a massive addition onto for them to just create one of the biggest coasters that we've ever seen at Cedar Point, or a big water coaster, or a big who knows what. They could do all kinds of things. I'm not putting them into a box, but I do think there will be something really big to go into Frontier Town, and then the rest of the train will go over the Forbidden Frontier Island that they have. I do think there's a very good chance of all of that kind of stuff if these two coasters get off with a screeching start. However, I think Siren's Curse was added to this list instead of the new water ride that they were, I think, or new coaster that was going to go over where the water ride was, because I think they realized that pushback from people was going to be so bad. First of all, Wild Mouse a couple of years ago, also made by Zamperla, was not the most fantastic or well-received start for a brand new ride. And then clearly we have Top Thrill 2 that was also just utterly terrible. The fact that it was only open for 6 days really had a lot of theme park people steaming, honestly. And along with me, it had me steaming too. So if that is the case, I think they saw an opportunity to get a new coaster. The rumor with Siren's Curse is that Siren's Curse was supposed to be meant for Six Flags Mexico initially, and then kind of had a zoning issue, so they weren't able to put it in there. So then it was potentially even moved to another park also, and then finally Cedar Point was like, we'll take it. So I do have to wonder if Cedar Point saw the opportunity for something cheap, something that could be very nice to have in the park, something that's a bit more pre-built and is going to be very easy to put into this kind of land space that they've never really filled in. It's been years that it's kind of sat vacant, and I think it was maybe the ace that they had for if there was ever something bad that had happened. And I think Top Thrill 2 was probably that bad thing that happened that they realized they needed to compensate for. So this year could be an incredible year of 2 coasters opening up, and not just 2 coasters opening up, but opening up in shifts, having a huge blast of Top Thrill 2 at the beginning of the year, and then having another big blast of Siren's Curse in the summer. However, there's also a very good chance that, yes, I know Zamperla is working on the ride, but they also worked on and tested the ride all winter last year. They also worked on and tested Top Thrill 2 all summer last year too. I watched it test multiple times. I watched them working on it. I documented shorts of them continuing to work on it, and nothing worked for them. If it doesn't work again this year, Cedar Point realizes that they need a failsafe. And that failsafe is Siren's Curse. So that's where I worry. I worry that maybe there's going to be a problem. Now, I hope I'm not right about that. I hope that Top Thrill 2 takes off, and I hope that Beach Cliff Studios rubs it in my face. And just like I was already wrong earlier about the other larger YouTubers who said that the Kingda Ka was going to be closing because they had a source and they weren't able to share that source, though, I will be more than willing to also apologize to Beach Cliff Studios because they do not believe that this is going to happen at all. And that's okay. If it doesn't happen, I'll be more than happy to eat crow publicly with Jesse and be like, hey, I'm so sorry. You were right, 100%. I just have a gut feeling, and it worries me about this. I do think one way or another, I think it's a good thing that Cedar Point is doing this because it shows me that they learned their lesson last year. Last year, literally everything from the shows to the merchandise that I'm wearing right now to every other part of the experience of the advertising of Cedar Point was all based around Top Thrill 2. And this year they are going, if it doesn't open in the summer, or if, let's say in the spring, it opens for 2 weeks, and then they have to close it again because there's another big problem because Zamperla really isn't very reliable. And that's not really a dig against them. It's just they've never made something anywhere near as big as this. How can you expect them to be perfect at it? You can't. But if that happens again, then Cedar Point has learned their lesson, and we're going to create some other opportunities for fun, including Siren's Curse. And that's just the coaster, let alone a couple of entertainment opportunities that I know are coming also for this next year. So anyway, I'm very excited about Top Thrill 2. I'm very excited about Siren's Curse, and I'm hoping that I am absolutely wrong about my fears here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be or not. What do you think, though? I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments. Do you think that Top Thrill 2 is going to be a problem, or do you think it's not going to be? I'd love to hear from you guys down there. Please let me know what you guys think about that, and press that subscribe button, especially if you made it to the end. Press that like button. Also, if you've made it to the end because you liked or hated something, so engage in this post and help more people see it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and let's go. Hey, thanks for watching. I release theme park related videos at least a couple times a week, so press that subscribe button if you made it this far. Also, check out similar videos in the playlist to the right or find my newest video to the left. Thanks again, and let's go!